according to U.S. officials, and a third source briefed on the call. According to one U.S. official, Trump told Netanyahu he was effing crazy and that the prime minister would be in prison if it were not for Trump, likely referring to the Israeli leader's years-long corruption trial. The president adding, quote, "Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this." That's the president of the United States. A second source briefed on the call said Trump was, quote, pissed and at one point yelled at Netanyahu, quote, "What the F are you doing?"
First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
To know war is to know that there is still madness in this world. There are poor to be lifted up, and there are cities to be built, and there's a world to be helped. Yet, we do what we must. I am hopeful, and I will try with best I can with everything I've got to end this battle and to return our sons to their desires.
I thank everyone who acts in support of Ukraine, in support of freedom, but the war continues. The acts of terror against peaceful people go on. 1 month already. That long. It breaks my heart.
Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
We fly over the top of Iran and Tehran. Fighters and bombers all day picking targets as they choose. As our intelligence gets better and better and more refined. Looking up, the IRGC and Iranian regime sees only two things on the side of aircraft: the Stars and Stripes and the Star of David.
The US President Donald Trump is warning all hell will rain down on Iran if it doesn't reopen the Strait of Hormuz within the next 2 days. He issued the threat on social media, writing, "Remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal or open up the Hormuz Strait? Time is running out."
Live from our studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Chongqing, China, this is Let's Talk Geopolitics with Cyrus, Janssen, and Alex Reporterfy.
will tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and you're not going to have a third world war with me. That I can tell you.
Well, everybody, I want to welcome you to this evening's live stream. My name is Cyrus Janssen, one of the hosts of Let's Talk Geopolitics. Now, I'm coming live at you from Guangzhou, China. I'm on the road for the next 2 months, traveling through China. You'll see I'm actually in a cubicle here in a co-working space, hence my very yellow background, but wanted to keep our momentum here on YouTube and talk about a topic that is really gathering a lot of interest, guys. Obviously, it's something that we've been covering here on Let's Talk Geopolitics for the last 3 months. And that, of course, is the Iran war, which honestly doesn't seem like it's any time coming to an end. And it just gets worse and worse for the Trump administration. I want you to stay tuned in today's video because we're bringing in a fantastic guest to the program. In addition to that, we've got some amazing tweets, some incredible videos, really to give you the context and that nuance that you really need to see. So without further ado, let's bring in Alex from Reporterfy Media, co-host here on Let's Talk Geopolitics. And Alex, please introduce our guest for this evening.
Does he really need an introduction? Really, does he? I mean, the last stream was just on fire with you guys on there. Chris Lally. Chris, great to see you. Where are you calling in from tonight?
I'm in Moscow, getting ready to head to St. Petersburg for the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum.
Well, absolutely fantastic. I just want to say thank you for your audience coming in tonight. The iChungqing guys are also joining the club. Reporterfy Media and Cyrus Janssen, just his group is in the house as well. Special shout out to everybody out there. I was just reading in the live stream feeds on your chat group, Cyrus. The following people are saying hello. And hello to Kevin. Look is 3431. Always nice to see you. And Lewis 3431. Great to have everybody in the streams here as we start to gear into this live stream. Cyrus, welcome back to China. Great to have you.
You know, it's fantastic to be here, guys. I've been filming a lot of projects. I just completed a 7-day trip to about 3 different cities in China. We got some exciting videos coming out on the channel that I'm really excited to share with you guys. But you know, I've kind of been getting back in the groove here in my China swing. Obviously, many of you know I started my channel really discussing China. But, you know, we've really been focusing on this Iran war, and I thought it'd be perfect to bring in Christopher for this week's show, Alex, because, you know, we've had him on the show before. We both interviewed him as well. I mean, he just does some fantastic work, you know, really giving us the better perspective here. And golly, I think that it is becoming painfully obvious day by day that Donald Trump has absolutely no idea what he's doing. The United States government has absolutely zero plan. And I want to bring up, I want to bring up a tweet to kind of start us here. For when you get that loaded up, just let us know. I'm going to bring this tweet up to kind of set the stage for what I think really is happening right now in Iran, and really describes perfectly, you know, what is going on as far as the situation. I mean, we're looking at obviously a stalemate for a long time. And I think this is actually a tweet that I found, I think that actually nails it right on the head. Iran has masterfully played Trump. He has to bomb them to have any leverage in negotiations. But if he bombs them, oil goes sky high. Markets tank. If he deals, he turns on Israel and loses every special interest donor that put him in office. And, you know, what we're seeing right now, and I think our guest Christopher would agree, is we're really seeing a tremendous amount of leverage being shifted over to Iran. And so, Christopher, let us know, you know, we last time we spoke was probably almost 2 months ago, you know, towards the beginning of this conflict, but, you know, we're well past 90 days now. Kind of give us your thoughts, you know, at how you're analyzing the war right now.
Not sure if we got Chris's feed going there. We'll come back to him in a moment. But Cyrus, while we get Christopher back onto the feed, I want to add here, today, I was just informed by a Canadian guy that I met a couple of months ago at the Canton Fair in Guangzhou. He was very distraught when I saw him. He was very upset, and I said, are you here for new business opportunities? And he was very clear. He said, listen, I've had to lay off 90% of my staff in Canada due to the tariffs, and this was in the aluminum sector. Now, if we've seen the price of aluminum here in the last couple of months, it's
I think year to date it's gone up almost 40 to 50%. We saw a big Bloomberg video on it yesterday saying that this is another metal that is moving into the stratosphere. So not only is it a focus on oil, but now we're seeing aluminum that plays a big factor when it comes to making automobiles. It's not just tinfoil that you're using to heat up some potatoes in the oven, but it's quite an important component needed. And I'm just wondering, where this is all going to come out and how it's going to come out for the entire market there. I just think it's on shoestrings, Cyrus.
Well, I think it is on shoestrings, and I think what's I'm going to add up. What's really interesting here, Alex, is talking about the financial markets is one thing, but I think what we're really seeing is a very big shift also happening in the United States, where we're seeing all of the momentum from the MAGA movement and really from Trump is really coming to an end. And I think that this is all going to culminate in a very big catastrophic movement here very soon, because, essentially the United States stock market is being propped up by the AI stocks, as we know. I mean, there's a lot of bullishness in the AI industry. And I'm going to just, for when you pull that next tweet up, I want you to go ahead and put that on the screen so that we can discuss this. This is going to be really important. But essentially, this is Matt Walsh, and I think this is a fascinating tweet, guys, because Matt Walsh is by far one of the biggest Trump supporters out there. He has been, a diehard Republican for a long time. But listen to how this message has changed so much in the last couple of months. Pretty much all of the prominent voices who supported the Iran war assured us it would be over by now. None of them will admit they were wrong. Even less will they admit that their initial assurances were based on nothing but their own wish casting. This whole shit show has been an enormous waste of time and resources, and our country has not benefited from it at all. Its advocates have moved the goalposts repeatedly and even to this day refused to clearly articulate what constitutes a victory and how we'll know that it's been achieved. And guys, I just can't tell you how important this is that you have a guy like Matt Walsh, who, again, diehard Republican, one of the biggest conservative voices that would have been an instrumental role in getting Trump elected in the White House. Now, of course, he's been thrown under the bus, right? People are attacking him because they're like, wait a second, you can't be turning on Trump right now. But he's just like, hey, I'm just trying to call a spade. But we're seeing that, right? You got Candace Owens, she's right there, near Christopher, over in Moscow right now, I believe she is. Candace Owens is in Moscow right now, tweeting out over there. We've got the Megyn Kellys. So, the whole right movement is just utterly collapsing. And people are trying to, save themselves. They're trying to basically get away from the absolute disaster that's coming. But Christopher, I think we got your feet in here now. We were trying to get you in earlier. Just share me your thoughts. It's been a couple of months since we've chatted, Christopher. I would like to get your thoughts on where we are in the war and, kind of give us from the Iranian perspective. What are they thinking as of right now?
Not only has it been a few months since we last spoke, but also I have had a chance to go to Iran for 2 weeks during this quote-unquote ceasefire period. So I was on the ground and I had the opportunity to go into the Strait of Hormuz. One of the first foreign journalists after the team of 3 that went ahead of us. We were then a group of 8, and we were the first sort of 12 or so journalists from the West and from other parts of the world who were able to go in. And what we saw, first and foremost, was that the Iranian military is not decimated. In fact, the first night I was there, we went to a rally, and there in front of me was a massive missile. And I thought to myself, oh my God, just right here. And they were parading them around, and people were shouting with excitement and joy that Iran had finally become a superpower, as it had been in ancient history. It had returned to the global stage. It had shown the weakness of the United States and Israel and their coalition. It showed their vulnerabilities. Iran never had gone to the full length of closing the Strait of Hormuz and carrying out all of these proportional responses, especially in the region. And the United States was not prepared for that. The United States was not prepared for Iran's military capabilities, leadership, resolve, discipline, the fact that they have created this mosaic network this Mosaic defense network that's horizontal and very much decentralized. And so they're able to maintain command and control, even when you take out leadership. And the United States was not aware of that. And if they were aware of it, they led, again, under false premises, they led the American public into war. Once again, like in Iraq and elsewhere, they led the American public into war, knowing full well that their objectives would not be achieved. And on the ground, I can tell you that everybody I spoke to was united, even if they were critical, and many are critical. Many are critical of the economy, of the difficulties that they have. But they said, look, this is a foreign invader attacking our country. Now's not the time to talk about the differences. Now's the time to unite and to show them who really is the king in this region. And they have done so. And you see the Trump administration keeps moving the goalposts, as Matt Walsh said in that tweet. And also, we don't really know what the objective is now. Is the objective a deal, no deal? Are we going to have a Cold War? Is this going to be a Korea-type situation? What are we looking at in the long term? And I will say this, right. Iran is stronger today than it was before. Iran is much stronger than it was before. And anyone who says the contrary doesn't know what they're talking about. I invite them to go to Iran on the ground. You will see people united from all classes, demographics, religious traditions, ethnicities, you name it. We saw women. I saw probably half the women in Tehran I saw were either with a loose headscarf or with no headscarf at all. So all of this kind of feminist stuff and things like that, it's over. The women without headscarves are on the streets carrying the sign of the supreme leader. That's where they've brought the situation now. So I just want to say that, you know, in summary of my experience there, the Iranian nation will not be defeated. Definitely not by force of arms. No way.
Yeah. Chris, why do you think the MAGA crowd continues to say, we won, we've defeated them, they are at the mercy of the American government now? Hegseth will get on there. His sound bits are basically like, we've decimated their military, we've decimated their ability to have a nuclear program. What is the reality here? And what is the reality, as you said, you were down in the Strait of Hormuz? I'm more curious from a trader's point, is oil getting out of there?
First, to your initial point, one has to be clear. What military objectives have been achieved? Sure, they've hit some, 10 to 20,000 targets. But in fact, media keep reporting that 90%, up to 90% of Iran's military and ballistic missile capability is still intact. So I don't understand what they ended up hitting over there. I know what they ended up hitting because I went to Minab. They hit civilian infrastructure. I saw the B1 bridge, the Karaj bridge. I saw Minab where they butchered hundreds of innocent people, including 120 or so school children and their teachers and parents and staff. I saw that. It was very clear that they damaged cultural sites and heritage sites. But in terms of military objectives, they have not defeated Iran. In fact, Iran is the first nation in history to hit an F-35 fighter jet successfully. So I was in Esfahan outside, and I saw multiple C-130s, the wreckage. We saw the Little Bird wreckage. We saw all the ice. I held a piece of the F-15 that was down. I took up the parachute of the American pilot that was there. So that's to show you, that's the strength of Iran. Iran doesn't need to have nuclear weapons.
Is the pilot still there?
The pilot is not there, as far as I know. They wouldn't tell me maybe if he was, but he's not there. But I will say this, in terms of trade, listen, when I was in the Strait of Hormuz, everything was organized, disciplined, no boats were moving. Everybody was kind of in rows in that strait and on the coast. And I'll tell you one thing, the engines were on. We could see the smokestacks billowing. So clearly there were people on there. The crews were still there. They were waiting for orders. But all the people that we spoke to, even the governor of the province, he said, we are ready for business. If somebody wants to come with us, they're not an adversary, they're not attacking us, no problem. And they've agreed, Iran has agreed with Oman about this environmental fee, which China rightfully said it's not a tax. It's an environmental maintenance fee for using the strait, which of course, for the Greens out there and for all the progressives, they should like that. That's a good thing to keep the nature, going. So that's how they've put it, and they challenged Trump's assertion that it was a toll, some sort of tax, and he was against it. The Chinese are saying it's not a tax at all. Never. Plus, the Chinese, I don't even think have to pay. The Chinese and Russians, they're good to go. They go free of charge.
Right.
You know, things were getting out. Things were getting out, but in limited quantity. Now we've heard that things are moving more quickly and efficiently. Of course, you asked about the oil. The oil from Iran is difficult to get out because there is still a naval blockade. Certainly, some ships have run the blockade. Some have been intercepted. Some have been hit and boarded. Others have made the great escape and were able to exit the Sea of Oman and continue on their journeys. But I will say we are in an age of piracy. Not only Iranian ships laden with oil, but also Russian ships are being boarded. Just 48 hours ago, French forces boarded a Russian vessel that was under the flag of one of the African countries. So there's a lot of things going on now. We're entering into a profound crisis, I think, for global markets if this piracy continues, which is a violation of international law and a violation of the rights that are afforded to sailors and to people on the high seas. So I think that that's going to be one of the big concerns that come out of this, especially knowing you, Alex, you are looking in the markets and trying to forecast where things are headed.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned crisis. I was out for dinner last week with a gentleman at the table, and of course, Iran came up on the table. And I never really invite these conversations to happen over a dinner table while I'm relaxing on the weekend, but they always come up. And the comment was very clear, and it was kind of a bit caught me off guard. It said, Alex, why do you care where oil is at 90 or 100? It's been there before. Why do you care if Iran was bombed? It doesn't affect me. Can you help me kind of debunk a statement like that?
Well, first and foremost, at the basic human level, the killing of other humans should affect us all.
Totally agree.
That's just having empathy and being a human with a moral and ethical compass. If you don't have that, if you're a sociopath or a psychopath, then I guess there's no helping, that, or if you're egocentric or narcissistic. But any human who sees the suffering of children, be they in Iran, be they in Gaza, be they in the Donbass, of which you and I were there last year, that should affect you. That should have a pull on the heartstrings, and you should advocate for peace, because you know that a world where some are suffering is a world where everybody then suffers in a way. And they suffer in a way because the world is less peaceful, more violent, more chaotic. It's just not a good place. That's why, for example, China, you look at China, a place like China, they're always advocating for peaceful solutions. Why? Because their kids live in peace. They don't have to deal with school shootings. There's very low crime and violence. What more do you want in a society? In the second phase, if you're thinking about it doesn't affect me, it affects you economically. It affects the prices that you have. It affects the society's members and the global community and their prices. Let me ask you a question. If we enter into a global recession and all of a sudden you have millions of economic migrants coming northwards or moving westwards, what's going to happen to those societies? You're going to see instability. You're going to see political chaos. You're going to see chaos at the borders. You're going to see police actions in the cities. You might see riots. So just at the basic level, all of these things affect us. The Strait of Hormuz accounts for 20 or so percent, 20 to 25% of natural resources coming out of the Gulf, especially petroleum products. That also includes agricultural products, including fertilizers. Nobody's talking about the effect that this could have on global food production. If people are starving, what's going to happen? It's going to be peaceful. People are going to die happily when there's being starved. I don't think so. People are going to pick up a Kalashnikov and go and fight for their right for bread. And we've seen that bread prices have been shown by academics to be a key indicator of regional and domestic security. So if, for example, bread prices are too high in some countries, it could lead to civil strife, civil war. It could lead to a government collapse, and then it could lead to migration and all of the other regional chaos that ensues. So it's not good for anybody.
Right.
Anybody who says that, oh, this is happening far away, it doesn't affect me. No, it absolutely affects you. It affects you because we live in a world that is much more connected. We're not living in Roman times or ancient China, Tang Dynasty, where things that happen, thousands of miles away or kilometers away don't affect us. And even then it affected them in some ways, by the way. Even then there were impacts that reverberated throughout those networks of trade and those networks that existed at the time. So I think that I would respond in that way. I would say, look, we live in an interconnected world where anything that happens around the world has deep impacts. We only have to look at 2008 and what happened there. That impact was felt everywhere. What happened with Lehman Brothers, what happened on Wall Street had an impact everywhere. There wasn't a country it didn't touch in one way or another.
You know, thank you for covering that, Chris, and I'll pass it over to Cyrus. Just want to make one last comment. I mean, another, I guess, talking point that came out of the gentleman's mouth, he was going on about they've been inflicting terror on the world for 47 years. I mean, where's that sound bit coming from? What seems to be generating that and just burned into the average person's head when they talk about Iran? I've been on this earth 50-some years. I haven't. Iran is a country, one of the countries I want to go to very soon. So, I mean, where's the sound bit coming from?
That sound bit is coming from the fact that they see Iran and its regional allies in this so-called axis of resistance as being terror groups. When in fact, if you look, people say, for example, Iran promotes terrorism. Well, let me ask you a question. What's the U.S. doing in Lebanon in the 80s? What's the U.S. doing in Iraq? What's the U.S. doing in Afghanistan? Why is the U.S. supporting the coalition and bombing Yemen? Why does the U.S. continue to support Israeli apartheid and genocide in Gaza, the West Bank, occupied East Jerusalem, in all of the Palestinian territories? Why? You just have to ask these simple questions. Why did the U.S. support regime change in Syria? Why does the U.S. now have a good friend in a former leader of Al-Qaeda who was on the FBI's most wanted list? And who was fighting against Al-Qaeda? Iranians. Because Al-Qaeda was an enemy of Iran because of the Shia-Sunni split, and also because many of these Wahhabi and Salafist groups see Shias as not even Muslim. So for me, it's a real shock when I hear these kinds of things, because I say, well, wait a minute. What have the Iranians had? Did the Iranians do 9/11? No. Most of the hijackers were Saudi. But nobody seems to say that Saudis are exporting terror, even though their madrasas are the ones that led to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, the war in Chechnya and Ingushetia, all of the terror we've seen in the region and beyond. They have been inspired from that school of Islam, not from Shia Islam. So I have a real problem with this talking point, because it's a talking point used by the Zionist lobby and the West to continue to try to destroy a revolution that has stood hand in hand with the Chinese, the Koreans, apartheid South Africa fighting with Nelson Mandela, with Cuba, with Venezuela, with Syria under Assad, with the Donbass. Where has Iran been? Iran's been on the right side of the equation for a long time, especially in terms of liberation movements, especially in terms of things that we are looking at geopolitically and saying, oh, all of these movements have one thing in common. They're against imperialism and colonialism. They want to liberate themselves. They want to have a new future that's not under the boot of some white guy in Washington or in Brussels. But you see, that's a problem. That's a problem for these people. They cannot handle that a major country in the world is not doing their bidding, is not kowtowing to them. That's why they don't like Putin. Right. That's why they don't like Xi. That's why they continue to say all of these are it's the age of dictators. It's the age of authoritarianism. What authoritarianism? The real authoritarianism is in the West. Is in the West that's brainwashing our children. It's in the West that continues to spend all of its resources on endless wars with no, as you see, no roadmap except the killing of children, the killing and maiming of civilians. What else has it brought to America? Has it brought more safety and security? Have all of these things? So I would absolutely not even entertain these kind of talking points anymore. Iran is defending itself. Iran didn't attack the US and Israel first. It was Israel that bombed Iran's embassy in Damascus and started the whole chain of events, which was a violation of international law and itself a war crime. So that's it. That's all you have to say. Iran didn't start. Iran didn't fire the first bullet. And you don't even have to go to modern history. Who supported the Shah and the secret police, the Savak, to oppress Iranians for decades? United States. That was their best friend. So Iranians rose up and said, we don't want the Shah anymore. Get rid of him. That was their right. Every people have a right. People talk about, they wave the yellow flag and they say, don't tread on me in the US. And they love this kind of libertarianism. Okay, every country has a right and every people have a right. They want an Islamic Republic? Let them have an Islamic Republic. China believes in the Communist Party? Let them have the Communist Party. Why do you have to interfere in other people's business? They have to interfere because it doesn't make their business go well. And they want to exert even more power and influence. They want to take even more. That's the world system that we live in. And that's why the talking point exists.
Yeah. Well, Christopher, I love your passion, and I mean, it's just we just wanted to give you the floor there because you have an incredible ability to speak the truth, and it's interesting coming back to China now, and a couple points I was really listening there just to make sure I could hit these points when I come back here, and you mentioned China and the fact that it's a safe society, that people are here. I just kind of have a personal story. I was actually with my children today, and one thing I want people to know is that. We have this idea that people in China don't know what's going on. And we're literally watching, we're at a restaurant for lunch and they have the CCTV, the China Central Television on. And, they're literally sharing the tweets that are going out, from Donald Trump, talking, this big report, coming out that he basically got into a yelling match with Netanyahu, basically said, look, your butt would be in jail if it wasn't for me, and basically, the entire thing that's been blowing up on social media today, that's being covered right here in China. The English tweets are being shown in Chinese, and basically covered in the news story. And, my son looked at me and he said, Dad, what's the news about? And I said, well, they're talking about the war. And he said, why do we have war? He said, that's why can't we just get along? And I said, yeah, that's what we're all trying to do, son. That's a really, a 7-year-old's observation on the world. So, the first point there, Christopher, when you had mentioned, why does this matter? People are like, who cares? Iran, price of oil, we forget the human cost, and again, a lot of suffering in Ukraine and Russia. A lot of casualties on both sides there in another war that has had a heavy Western influence, obviously. And, like you mentioned, this 47 years of terror, it is such a talking point, much like when we talk about China and people say, oh, Cyrus, in China, nobody has freedom. They're all slaves over there. And it's like, where do you get that point? Have you ever spent a day and have you ever actually spoken to a local Chinese person? And if you're interested in that, guys, this week I've been traveling through China, sharing a bunch of videos and tweets from my travels, really connecting. I was off the beaten path this week, going into some very small little towns, in the middle of nowhere in China. And it was amazing, because then you're really connecting with the Chinese people. You're connecting with people that have never seen a foreigner before, and able to communicate with them and able to understand a little bit from their perspective. So, this is why we have guests on the show, especially someone like Christopher who has that deep knowledge of geopolitics and really the situation on there. But Christopher, I want to go back to the point I think is most interesting, that you were one of the first journalists in the Strait of Hormuz. Can you just kind of, I want to learn more about that experience. Were you on like a boat? Did you take like a smaller boat? Did you cruise around? Were you on the shore? Like what was, is there a lot of action going on, or is it much more quiet? And you'd mentioned some boats were lining up on the side, that basically it's a very organized system right now. But were you on a boat? Like, did you get out in the middle of the strait there and kind of take a look around? I'd just like to know more about that story. I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah, sure. We all got, but it was a team of us. We all got onto a boat, usually one of the ferries that goes to the islands, because Iran has islands in the Strait of Hormuz. It's not only the coast, it's also various major and smaller islands that Iran controls there that are part of Iranian territory, and people live on them. So this boat took us out, and we went all the way up to almost the line to where you get to the border with Oman. We kept going and going and going, and you could see the islands around us. It was absolutely amazing. It was full of boats. As far as the eye could see, you could see boats on the horizon. Boats, and then these big islands that were out there, and also a couple smaller ones too. By the way, these islands were strategic in around the 15th, 16th, 17th century for the Portuguese.
Okay.
The Portuguese actually controlled. There was a Portuguese castle. So when you're thinking about the age of empires and imperialism and mercantilism, the Portuguese took part of the Strait of Hormuz because it was critical for their own mercantile trade. They didn't last too long, but they were there. And there was the remnants of the castles you could see from the boat. It was absolutely amazing to see. So much history. And it was very quiet. It was peaceful. There was not much going on. As I said, there weren't really boats moving. We were really the only vessel that was moving in the strait at the time that was closer to the shore. As we went out, you could see some boats in the distance. but everything was organized and orderly. And when we got closer, we saw the small speedboats. There were a couple of them cruising around, but it was beautiful. I mean, the weather was perfect, blue sky, sunny, beautiful water, and just these magnificent boats that were out there. Big boats for petroleum, cargo ships, ships that carried other natural resources. It was unbelievable to see, really unbelievable. And I put some pictures and videos on my Instagram, on my X. We still have some stuff to put on YouTube, but it was unbelievable to see up close and personal. And we did a live report. I did a live report for RT, and Katya, my colleague, did a live report for Greek media. So we were the first two journalists who did live reports from the Strait, which was amazing. Which was an amazing possibility. But it was such an amazing experience, because in your mind you think that the Strait is like fully militarized and nothing moves, and there's all soldiers, sailors everywhere. Not even one military boat was just, until we got to the shore. We saw a couple small naval patrol boats, kind of Coast Guard types. That was it. Everything else was moving normally and just very calm and very peaceful.
Well, I think a really interesting point there is that, like you mentioned, the fact that it's so peaceful there kind of is a testament to Iran's strategy here, because the whole thought is that the United States, we have the biggest, baddest navy in the world. No one can touch us. We're invincible. I mean, and I've heard some people on the other side of the spectrum, the super MAGA guys who are saying, what, let's just put all of our Navy, fleet in there. We'll just dominate everything. We'll take them over. Just kind of this, lack of understanding, because that's what Iran's been able to do. Like you said, it's the speedboats, right? I mean, they can basically get two guys in a speedboat, and it almost impossible to show up on a radar. They're quick, they're in, they're out, they're causing chaos. But I mean, you actually need a lot less firepower and manpower than you probably thought. It's not like Iran has this aircraft carrier that these two big aircraft carriers are coming in that they're going to battle each other. It's much more smaller and efficient, and actually that's probably what's caused a huge surprise, to the United States, that wow, we do have on paper a much stronger naval force. On paper, we should be able to dominate, but it's almost like you've come to the battle expecting to see another Goliath-sized fleet to battle, but no, you've got the little shepherd boy there on the other side. We know how that story ends up. Is that Goliath goes down and gets his head cut off, and I mean that's where the United, like you said, I mean. I'm trying to be as objective as possible, and I just tried it. And it's funny because every now and then in the United States, you hear people where it's like, "Oh man, Donald Trump's doing amazing. We just can't stop winning." And it's like, well, what have we actually won? Like, what have we actually done in Iran that has been anything of effective? And like I mentioned, that's why I wanted to share those tweets, because it's starting to really unravel for the right side. I mean, it really is. And I'm going to bring up another tweet here. I think is really good. But I mean, this is. Let me see. There you go. So here's our next one that you can bring up. I think this is kind of I always like to add a little comedy in here, because I think this is really important. You're gonna see an amazing tweet here in a second when we get this up on screen. But don't forget, when Rome was collapsing, emperors would use gladiator fights to distract the people from the corruption of the state at that time. This is all starting to make sense now. Who agrees? And of course, we're looking at the White House lawns there being turned into a UFC cage match. In addition to that, to the right of that image is, the White House ballroom, which has just been, completely destroyed that. So another tweet, I don't have a picture of that tweet, but someone said, my gosh, it looks like a meth family moved into the White House, like the whole thing is just absolute utter chaos. But I mean, a lot of it is distraction, right? Because we're coming up to the 250-year anniversary of the United States, which is only just about a month away. It's supposed to be a grand celebration. We've had Donald Trump. I mean, this is where we are right now, where Donald Trump has invited a number of artists to come and perform, and many of them are now starting to all pull out of the event because they're like, this is just not going to be a good thing. And now he's just like, well, maybe I'm just going to give a speech then. Maybe that's, the people, that's what they want. They want to hear me. Maybe I'll just do an hour-long speech about how great America is. And it's like, wow, that'll be a great 250-year anniversary celebration. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing in my perspective, guys, I'm going to hand it back to Alex after this, is, I see a lot of chaos, a lot of instability, But the defining thing that is going to be this Trump administration in 2026 is an absolute inability of any strategic planning, and an inability of really any clue on what they actually want to accomplish. And you're just making things up as you go. And it's a very dangerous thing to do when you have the global economy in the palm of your hands and really the livelihood of millions of people. And like Christopher, you mentioned earlier, when we start looking at the fertilizer not getting out, again, you don't start seeing those maybe till 4 or 5 months later. Obviously you need to fertilize, you need to plant crops. This needs to happen. But all of that will start to to wash out later on this year. And so, yes, it does affect millions of people. And it's sad to see, just one crazy man in the White House led by another crazy man in Israel that can unleash this kind of chaos on the world. Back to you,
I
Alex.
think it's tapped down all the way into the administration at every single level. I mean, the bomb, bankrupt, and bully strategy used to work, but it doesn't work anymore. So then desperation rolls in. And again, we try to unravel what the strategy is. Here's an interesting article that I want to pull up here, and I would like to have your guys' insight on this. This was in the SBBY. It's a Belarusian article here. It was written, photos are from Reuters and other sources. But this is saying the following: the diplomatic axis is shifting eastward, with Beijing rewriting global rules. Russia supplies resources and security. China supplies industry, technology, and capital. Europe's old economic base was destroyed by its own political choices. And it's quite an interesting read here by Andrei Zakharov. I mean, the way he talks about it, he says, okay, listen, this week events have clearly demonstrated that the key diplomatic nexus is shifting east. And it goes on to say, while Russia and China are building a new world order, Washington is sending its European allies to the geopolitical almshouse. And if you want to know what that is, for all the people that haven't heard that word lately, an almshouse is a historic type of charitable house provided for the poor, elderly, or distressed people. I think that's pretty accurate, don't you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the fact that this move eastward, and really I would say southward, if we think about global south, east and south, is really something that takes time. People are saying, for example, they'll say, well, why doesn't China intervene right now? Why doesn't Russia intervene? These are long historical processes. These take time. They take decades, if not centuries, to build up these capabilities. It wasn't until 1945 that the US really eclipsed the British, and the British Empire started to really decline and was entering its terminal phase. So these things are in longer historical periods, and they have this kind of like longue durée view. So when you understand that, you realize that right now we are living in that pivotal moment. We are seeing the process. Of course, we live in the age of minute to minute, tweet to tweet, but in reality, when you kind of look at this in its totality, we just celebrated 25 years, right? We're on 26 years now of the of the China-Russia partnership that, Putin came to Beijing after US President Donald Trump was there. But you see that these strategic partners take their time, they invest, they are stable actors, they slowly build capabilities at the cultural level, the diplomatic level, the technological level, of overall economic integration. All of those things have major impacts long term. Whereas the United States, every administration comes in like a cowboy, destroys what the other administration did, and tries to rewrite the rules. And that doesn't really help. But you see the long-term strategic thinking of President Xi Jinping and President Putin in Russia and others who are looking and saying, okay, we're going to build our cooperative links, and over time, we're going to slowly integrate and deepen. And you see that in trade. You have the Belt and Road. Now you're seeing the northern route, this sort of Arctic road that's coming that allows China to bypass all of this craziness below. Why? Because it's Russia that can help with that. Russia has the icebreakers. Russia has the capabilities. So all of these things reveal that, of course, it's going to go eastward, because westward is what? Westward is war. Westward is chaos. Westward is instability. Westward is elections. You're in the Fifth French Republic. Every administration in the US goes crazy. every kind of prime minister falls in the UK. Starmer's at his lowest levels out of any prime minister in history. I mean, why would you want to go there? Choose stability. Choose the dignity and discipline over that undisciplined kind of hooligan West, which is the inverse of what the media says. The media says that the hooligans are in the East, when in reality, the hooligans are in the West.
Chris, I want to add to this, and I need actually Cyrus's input from an American that has really tried to be the ambassador of peace here for a lot of these nations around the world here. We see China's interest is obvious in this. In the event of conflict with the U.S. over Taiwan, Russia, with its bottomless land reserves of raw materials, becomes a guaranteed source of energy for its eastern partner, one that American aircraft carriers are physically incapable of blocking. An alliance with Moscow gives Beijing access to unique defense technologies and bolsters Chinese ambitions with the might of the Russian nuclear arsenal, creating an insurmountable barrier for the Pentagon. Cyrus, I want to hear your insights on this.
Yeah, I want to first address the last question, because I think there's just an interesting point that we need to bring up is, you talked about the demise of European countries and their governments. Yeah. One of the best things that I heard, I believe I was talking to Jeffrey Sachs about this, and he just mentioned the need for Europe has to find a way to work with Russia for one simple reason. They share a border. Nothing more than that, because at the end of the day, it sounds so simple, but honestly, you have to find a way to work because Russia's not going anywhere. And so that basically, I believe it was Jeffrey Sachs who just basically came to that point and said, look, the best thing that Germany had going on in its economy is the simple fact that it was importing cheap Russian gas. This is how their auto companies and these factories in Germany became so profitable. And it was basically a great way for them to get ahead. And it was a reliable partner. And all of a sudden, like that article it said, look, to Europe's own demise, they're the ones that are making this problem, right? We saw this during the Ukraine war. We saw the Nord Stream pipeline went up. We saw the fact that essentially, the United States said, hey, we'll sell you some LNG gas. We'll sell you whatever gas you need. It's going to be 4 times the price of what you had it from Russia. But hey, we're USA, we're your friends. And the Germans just said, sure, we'll take it, no problem. And so again, it's just this willingness to not have a backbone and not try to figure things out on your own and just, again, being that lapdog of the United States. But I think the problem here is, again, you've got to find a way to make that work, right? Russia shares a border, figure it out, Europe. You should be incorporating this. And this is something that we all know, right? I mean, the first thing, after the fall of Soviet Union is Russia wanted to be included into NATO. Okay, if not, we're not allowed to be in NATO. Great. I thought it was the whole purpose was the Soviet Union. Well, if we're not going to be allowed to be in NATO, then have us in the EU. No. And the big fallacy that we know now is that, even after the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States has always regarded Russia as an enemy, right? Even in our foreign films, or in our local films, I should say, in the United States, right? Russians are always perceived as the bad guy. That's just how our Hollywood and the propaganda works. But again, I want to now switch to that next topic about Taiwan and China. And, the biggest thing that, we've said multiple times in the stream, Christopher, you've mentioned it before, is right. You're looking at China as a peaceful society. It's a society where, the government is honestly doing incredible things for the people here, much higher than anywhere in Western civilizations. And again, I've met up with some British people here. I mean, and they're talking about the state of UK politics and just the nonsense that's going on there. You can't, it's very hard to find that, right? Like, go around in a world right now and start looking at these Western liberal democracies and who's shining right now, right? Which country's doing well? It's not Canada, certainly not Italy, it's not Spain, it's not Germany, it's not France, it's certainly not America. I mean, you start going to all of these big boy countries that are kind of the shining stars of liberal democracies, and none of them are really doing great. But then you come to China and you take the high-speed rails, you go to these smaller tier cities like I have this past week, the 3rd and 4th tier cities, you see what the government's doing in there. and you see the quality of life, but you just see how the people, there's a lot of peace, here in China. People live a much simpler life because, they don't have a government, that is, doing all of these crazy things that the United States government is. I saw a Instagram reel this week that it was somebody just panning this beautiful train station, and it said, "Amazing what happens when your government officials don't spend their time touching young children." Obviously a shot at the Epstein Island there, and but I mean that's it's a joke, but it's so true. What I saw another one. My feed is getting very China on Instagram. I saw another one where it was an American that was raising their children in China and said, why do you raise your kids in China? And had shared all of these articles talking about how the Chinese government has made any type of sexual crime against a minor immediate death penalty. Right? There is zero tolerance on that. Right? Anything connected with minor and some type of violence or sexual assault, death penalty. You're out of here. And that's because that's not what we want in our society. And, I think a lot of Americans would probably be right on board with that. I think they'd be happy with that. I mean, that's, any person with a normal brain would think that. But again, I mean, I hear the Taiwan question as a China analyst. I mean, this is something that I get asked all the time, literally every single interview I give. And again, we're talking about a country that hasn't been in war for a long time, since 1979. We're talking about, I was with Taiwanese people today. I mean, speaking Mandarin. I mean, you have to remember, Chinese people look at Taiwan as part of China. And these are their brothers and sisters, right? This is not some foreign nation that they're going to attack. And I think the ball is really in the United States court. And I think, honestly, it gets blown up out of the media a little bit too often. We saw, for example, President Trump, delay the arms package to Taiwan. There was rumors that he was potentially going to become the first president in almost 60 years to give the president of Taiwan a phone call. And then, of course, he backed down from that. Trump's not stupid when it comes to China. I think he's a little bit more cued in on that. When it comes to Iran, he's pretty stupid. I don't think he has any idea what he's doing there. But with China, he has a lot more experience because let's not forget, he has done business. And there's a reason why, 2 weeks ago, Trump was in Beijing with his 17 American CEOs, flattering the Chinese government and simply talking about Xi Jinping in a very favorable way. The United States needs China. It's as simple as that. It's a message I've been preaching for 5 years on YouTube, and it's something that more people need to understand. Now, we're getting a little bit off topic, but I mean, big news today. Steph Curry, NBA just signed with Li Ning, massive deal for China, So again, I mean, I just hear all of these crazy things talking about, how China's the worst. Everything is going to be, we have to decouple from China. But every single day I wake up and there's new business deals being done with China. And you come here and you see the market, you understand why. And this is going back to that question about the shift. Why is the shift east? And like Chris said, it's also going south because the global south is rising fast.
Listen, in 2013, I got a China government scholarship. So in 2013, I moved to China as a China government scholar. And my scholarship was China government scholarship for Sino-US cultural communication. So I was also like an ambassador for the US as a school, as a college student. Well, at that time, a master's degree student. So I'm in my mid-20s. I'm coming into China. And it was amazing. It was 2013. Just right in the beginning, towards the beginning of President Xi's, reign and sort of the transformations that were happening. And I moved to Wuhan before it was known for coronavirus. And it was unbelievable because I was one of the few foreigners out there in the boondocks, of China and making my way. And of course, I wasn't a YouTuber at the time. If I had been, I probably, who knows where I'd be now. But I was enjoying it and I was taking it all in. And I traveled to Xinjiang, to Xizang, to Inner Mongolia, to Yunnan, everywhere. Chongqing, of course, before Alex was there. And for me, what was amazing was I saw the transformation in 2 years happening before my very eyes. So much so that when my parents came, they said, "Oh my God, the high-speed rail, the Gautier is unbelievable." I said, "Yes." And we have to deal with the T in Boston that screeches as it goes in 1970s cars, and you're like, this is the city of MIT and Harvard. And meanwhile, a fourth tier city, Gautier. And you're like, how does this work? It works because the government invests in its people. And that's very important. I was just in China. I went to Guiyang. I hadn't been there in since 2015. And I was shocked at the changes that I saw. I was shocked. Not only the infrastructure, but just overall, especially in throughout Guizhou, it was unbelievable the things that I saw. And I was so surprised.
Yeah,
They said, how did they do this in 10 years? They said, this is how China works. And it's a further proof. People, listen, nobody's going to bite your head off. Go and visit. Go and visit. Take a trip. You can get a 10-year visa from the US. You can get they're open for so many people. Go there and just see. And I think that it's proof. It's proof of a government's priorities. If a government prioritizes its people's well-being, your society is more healthy. If a government is one of corruption, oligarchy, touching kids, bombing kids, doing all that stuff, it's going to be an unhealthy society. It's going to be a society of bread and circus and violence and chaos and loneliness. Whereas in China, you saw in the public parks, everybody get together, dancing, singing, the old red songs. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the kind of world I want to live in. This is the dream world for me, not the disaster that we live in the West.
I agree with you, Chris. And I mean, every morning I wake up here in Chongqing for the last 6 years. Just how you described it here, you wake up with excitement here. 6 years promoting this city. And to give you some figures, 600 million tourists over the last year. And from the international side of things, on May Day weekend, we saw 42.8 or 9% increase of inflows internationally. The city's booming. Wasn't well known in the late 2019s and 20, but being part of that, putting it on the map is something that I will always cherish and be very happy. I'm going to hand the rest of the live stream over to Cyrus Janssen now. Cyrus has some topics that he needs to discuss with you viewers. You guys need to stick around. And I'll be there into the chats with everybody. Chris, what an honor to spend time with you again today. Very well spoken. Can't wait to see you again in the flesh so we can go over lots of things that we need to talk about. But anyway, passing it over to Cyrus. Thanks again, Chris. Guys, from Reporterfy Media, Chongqing, Cyrus Janssen channel, Chris Halali's channel. Thank you so much for having me on tonight's program, guys. Thanks.
Thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely.
Look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for being here as always. And just before you go, I was actually in Guiyang yesterday and took the train, and I was at that train station just yesterday. So actually, I'll give a little preview of my video. They just built in Guizhou province the world's tallest bridge. And so I actually went to go film a YouTube video about that. It should be coming out on the channel later this week. I'm very excited there. It's an amazing project. You know, I actually had a lot of fans on the channel reach out and said, Cyrus, we'd love to see you do this. Go to that bridge. And I got to be honest, if I'm being fully transparent, I was kind of like, all right, cool. Like, it's a bridge. Like, it's, you know, okay, great. You know, like, you know, how impressive can it be? You know, and then you get there and you're walking across it, and it's absolutely incredible. Like, I mean, it actually blows your mind, just the ingenuity involved, how fast. I mean, everywhere is 5G. So you're like in the middle of, like, there's live streaming in the middle of this bridge in Guizhou, in like one of the most remote areas. And it's just been an amazing project, and how they have lifted all these villages around there, created thousands of new jobs. I mean, it's a really cool project, and you can just see the people there, how proud they are. There was a story of a man that had left that little village and gone to, you know, the outskirts. I think he was in Anhui province, you know, on the outskirts of Shanghai. He went to work, and then when he heard that they were building the world's tallest bridge in his hometown, he literally said, I need to go back and be a part of that. And he went back. He actually, you know, started renting out guest houses, you know, at his in-laws' place. He now has 90 guest houses. He has basically, like, he's running an Airbnb, you know, for visitors, you know, to come and see this bridge. And he's like, he turned into this amazing entrepreneur. That's the kind of stories that are it's so inspirational, you know, and I think that are just really important for people to kind of understand a little bit more about the world and about China. I've kind of reached a tipping point, where sometimes you're engaging with people on X, and they've, especially these US politicians, they tweet all this stuff about China, and it's like, you have yet to visit China, nor have yet to actually speak with a local Chinese person. That says it all. If you're not here on the ground speaking to local Chinese people and really getting an understanding, and I would imagine it's the exact same thing in Iran, because that's exactly the same perspective that you're sharing. That's why I think your testimony is so great, and I think it's just always a pleasure to share the screen with you, Christopher. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had an opportunity. I look forward to your videos. I had an opportunity to go see that bridge in person in April before I went to Iran.
Nice.
It was unbelievable. It's magnificent. And I went on crutches. And they took care of me.
Jeez.
Imagine, I'm here with a broken fibula and I'm walking and hobbling along. They took the best care. So that's to show you that China is open for all people, for anyone with any difficulties. The Chinese will be there to help you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Well, Christopher, I'm going to do a little promo for one of our sponsors for the live show now. So I'm just saying thank you again for joining us today. And everybody, if you enjoy topics like this, which I know you do because you are, part of this, this live stream, this movement that we're doing here, and here on YouTube. And one of the events that I go to every year is an event called Nomad Capitalist. It is an amazing opportunity where entrepreneurs, businessmen and leaders, and really people that are very curious about how to prepare for the chaos in the world. I've been very fortunate to be a guest speaker at this event for the last 2 years. I'm very honored to be invited back again for the third time in a row to be basically given a keynote speech about geopolitics. And the main thing, I get this so many in much of our comments. I know Alex as well. Where it says, Cyrus, what can we do to prepare? How do we, do we get a second passport? Do we look at investment overseas? What does that look like? How do we do it? And honestly, if this interests you, this is by far the number one event in the world that you can attend. So I go to an event called Nomad Capitalist Live. This year, it's November 4th through the 7th in Cancun, Mexico. Super excited to go there because I'm going to be giving a big speech there. There's going to be about 40 speakers from around the world, again, talking about all of these different things, how they're, relocating abroad, how they're reducing their taxes, how they're, getting second passports. So if any of this interests you, we're going to roll this promo to close out our show today. And a huge thank you to Nomad Capitalist for their support as always. And if you're interested to come meet me in person, see me speak, I'll be there in November, and you can get your tickets now. And everybody, thank you for the wonderful show. Let's roll that promo, and we'll see you guys all in our next video soon.
The most memorable part of Nomad Capitalist is the variety of people you meet. It's incredible to see people from all over the world in different walks of life coming together and exchanging ideas. That's really what Nomad Capitalist is about.
The networking has been second to none. The friendships made in a short period of time with like-minded people has been really important.
What I found really interesting about the event so far is broadening my vision and horizons around so many different markets and how you can access them.
I think events like this really matter today because we've got millions of people who are looking for answers, who have lots of experience from all over the world, and they live individual lives. And at an event like this, people can come together and really share their experiences.
I've been watching him for many, many years, and that was probably one of the reasons and influences of me leaving the UK and moving to Southeast Asia. So to be in this event and actually meeting the people who I've watched for many years is pretty cool. It almost feels like a full circle moment.
For me, the best part is the people I've been meeting so far, to be honest. I've met individuals who have connections in places where I'm actually planning to do business or establish certain entities and so on.
Events such as this one are deeply inspiring. They are challenging in that you've got to ask yourself questions about some of the old assumptions you've held. But more than anything, they offer possibility. It's not just hope born out of rhetoric or anything. They offer hope in that it's real sense, real ability and practical ways, an opportunity to really move skills, capital, and people all over the world.